Welcome, Roughnecks. In some of my earlier videos, I mentioned that I was going to start a series where I start showing off my Gears collection. I know there's a few people who are very interested in seeing collections and have actually been asking for my collection to be shown. So I'm quite excited to actually get this series going. So this would be episode 1, if you like, of the start of my collection being shown. So before I started filming and recording myself making my customs, I actually spent a couple of years making customs beforehand. So I have a few customs that haven't actually been seen, unless of course you are on my Instagram, where they're on there. I've done stories and the backstory of them. I'll go into the backstories a bit in this video, but I won't go into too much detail, but I will explain at least enough so you guys can understand these customs and the backstory. That's literally what this video is, episode 1 of my collection, but instead of it being my Gears collection that I've brought, this is my customs before I started creating videos to show off my customs. So let's get to it. So this guy is Khan. The backstory of this guy is he was an albino locust that was born. He isn't actually a Ferron, but I will get back to that. So when he was born with a genetic disorder that made the skin pigment white instead of grey. This in turn created a thicker hide than usual for the locust, but due to what the locust would consider a genetic disorder, they decided that he would not see the light of day, if you like. He would not be on the surface of Serra. He would not serve the Queen in the Queen's Guard. None of the generals were willing to take him on. So at a young age, he was left to fend for himself. He was sent to the Hollows to fight in the tunnels against the Lambent, where they expected him to die pretty quickly. They didn't want him fighting on Serra, and humans seeing him and realising that there's genetic issues within the locust horde. So Queen wanted pure breeds fighting on the surface to make the species look stronger. They don't want any defects being seen and it being used as a sign of weakness to show against the locust. So while he was in the Hollow, he ended up becoming quite the Lambent killer. Long story short, he ends up becoming this absolute unit within the Hollows. He ends up having his own following that start disregarding the Queen and start following this guy who, at this point, he has no name. They didn't bother giving him one because they thought he would literally die pretty quickly. He ends up injuring himself while fighting a drudge that explodes in his face, which causes him to lose an eye, and the scarring on his face, which you can see. Yeah, so it has sort of the damage on his eye. He loses the eye, and the damage on the face is quite severe. This is where he starts getting the name, Scarface, Ghostface. Along the tunnels, there are whispers of his growing legendary status, to the point where if the Locust are running low of morale or on the verge of defeat, if they see this guy or any of his makeshift banners that his followers have made, they suddenly have this massive second wind to get back into it, just to follow him back in and fight. This particular Locust, he has completely refused to acknowledge the Locust horde in any way. He simply fights for himself. He doesn't care if he lives or dies, he just fights. Not to prove himself, to prove the Locust wrong, that they were wrong about him. The more he fights, the more his legendary grows. It gets back to Ram, Scourge, Myra, and although Myra is impressed, she still refuses to acknowledge him into the Locust army. The only general that comes down into the Hollows and acknowledge him was Khan from the Judgment Games. Being a Locust with a disfigurement himself, the two bonded, them both having some kind of disfigurement or a genetic dysfunction according to the Locust. And upon Khan being defeated by Baird, this is when he decided to take on Khan's name as a sign of respect to his only friend. He then decides to give himself the name Khan. The Ro bit is simply just an addition that I made. Rohan, Lord of the Rings. So the Ro is from Rohan, then Khan. My love for Lord of the Rings is being thrown into it, so why not? When the Hollows are about to be flooded, as locusts are evacuating, but he decides to stay. He has no intentions on fleeing and living above the surface with locusts that had no desire to acknowledge him as a fellow locust or a fellow grub. They just basically don't want to know you, wash your hands off you, go get yourself killed. That's basically what they did. So he stays in the hollow, fending off the Lambent that are still coming. His followers, who are truly loyal to him, decide to stay with him, and as the hollow is flooded from Jacinto sinking, he is in fact drowned along with the rest of the Locust and Lambent that are down there. So, bit of a tragic story. This was actually my very first custom that I made. It wasn't exactly a tricky paint job, it was just turning a red Ferron grey, well, silver. So the idea is he found a Ferron who had been disgraced according to the Locust Horde. They sent him down in the hollows to die. He died, and Rokan, having no armour, decided to take the Ferron armour. He stripped it off the red paint and decided to leave it as the base coating of the armour, which is the silver. So he does have spots of sort of, it's meant to be like rust, and they're just decaying metal because it's meant to be, he's worn this for years, you know, probably a very smelly guy at this point. You know, he's got dirt on his arms and face, and the hammer burst, we let go of it. Yeah, so, you know, black, silver, bronze, or brass, I think. I can't remember if it's bronze or brass, but yeah, so he was my very first custom that I made that got me into doing this as a kind of a full-time hobby. On to the next. As you can see, I'm sure you guys know who this is already. It's the Gilded Ram from the Gears 4/Gears 5 multiplayer. Probably one of my favourite customs that I've done, especially early on. It's amazing how much a simple black and gold coat can just, how awesome it can make an already awesome figure look even more awesome. There's a lot of awesome there. I need to update my vocabulary. But anyway, while playing the multiplayer games, I absolutely love playing as Ram. He's my main go-to Locust character, and when they released the Gilded skin on Gears 4, I did everything I could to make sure I unlocked the skin. When I realised I had a couple of spare Rams and my painting skills had gotten better over the course of the customs I'd done, I wanted to give this guy a go because it's one of my favourite skins for Ram, and especially in the Gears 4 game. So, you know, and I wanted to have the physical version of this character on my shelf. So yeah, I did it because why not? That's the whole point of customs, right? Give ourselves the customs that we don't have that we want. And of course, I did the same with a Lancer. He doesn't really hold it pretty well in terms of, you know, you've either got to hold the ammo box or the ammo magazine, shall I say, or the chainsaw, which is never going to be good for your hands, but yeah, it still looks good. And depending on how you want to say it could be the positive or the negative opposite. The heroic Ram, you know, instead of black and gold, it's white and gold. He does have red gems dotted around. This was done with the red gemstone paint to make it look like actual gemstones, but I forgot to put silver base paint down that you put the paint over, so it kind of just looks like a really flat red on the white. Same on the gun, there's some, you might be able to see some red dots. Yeah, so I mean it's still good enough. It looks at a distance it looks fine. Up close you can clearly tell it's, you know, red painted dots, and it is kind of flat, but it looks good enough. Of course, Ram being one of my favourite characters in the entirety of Gears, having a couple of spares of him, why not? The heroic Ram to go with the Gilded Ram. And to go with my heroic and gilded, I decided to make a recruit styled Ram or Theron Ram. So if you are aware of Ram's backstory, he started out as a Theron and he rose the ranks pretty quick and became a pretty outstanding Locust and rose the ranks. He kind of flew through them. So as much as having Ram in his black armor is awesome, and I do have that figure still, so I haven't sort of got rid of the original Ram, I wanted to have him in his Theron state. So I actually did paint this one. So what I could have done, which would have been a lot easier, a lot quicker, is in fact just do a head swap. I could have swapped Ram's head with a Theron's head, and that would have been the custom done, a lot easier. But instead, this is in fact a Ram's body that I painted. You can't see him. So this is in fact a Ram's body that I painted. So he gave it a coat of red, and then dirtied him up, gave him some scratches on his armor, a bit of washing to get some dirt and get all the detail out. And yeah, it looks pretty good. I kind of like the fact that the red's still quite vibrant, so it still looks kind of new. So showing that although he's still quite new to being a Theron, he's still absolutely kicking ass and being brutal with all these dents and scratches in his armor. He's taking no prisoners. I don't actually know if I have a Theron to compare. Bear with me. Aha! Of course I do. I have Therons everywhere. I have a mad box just full of Therons. It's ridiculous. Like, this is the difference between the two. So the official NECA Theron, the red's quite darker. The armor looks a lot more gritty. This guy's been fighting for 15 years. You can tell that by his armor. Yeah, this guy's reasonably new. His armor's still borderline fresh. So that's kind of the look I was going for with him. In one of my videos I did last year, I have the collection of cleavers that were 3D printed for me by my good friend LJ. There is one of the cleavers there that is actually for the Theron Ram. I think it was the bloodied one that I did. So again, if you haven't seen that video, to go check it out, and you'll be able to see the cleaver that I painted for Ram. The idea of that is he's just killing everyone with a cleaver because he doesn't. It's Ram, He ain't using the gun. He's gonna stab you.